Discovery. The ISS Frontier hung silently in the void, a gleaming silver needle against the backdrop of infinite stars. Commander Ilara Voss stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the holographic display before her. It showed nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual scattering of hydrogen clouds and distant galaxies. But Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, waiting to be found. She turned to her science officer, a lanky man named Kai Ortega. "Anything on the long-range sensors?" Kai shook his head. "Nothing yet, Commander. Wait." His fingers danced across the console, his brow furrowing in concentration. "I'm picking up an anomaly at the edge of our sensor range. It's faint, but it's definitely there." Ilara leaned in, studying the readout. The anomaly was unlike anything she'd ever seen, a ripple in the fabric of space-time that seemed to defy all known laws of physics. "Set a course," she ordered. "I want a closer look." As the frontier approached, the anomaly grew clearer. It was a ship, but not like any ship Ilara had ever encountered. It was massive, easily dwarfing the frontier, and its hull seemed to shimmer and shift, as if it weren't entirely solid. "Hail them," Ilara said, but there was no response. The strange ship just hung there, silent and enigmatic. "Commander," Kai said, his voice tight with excitement, "the energy readings from that ship are off the charts. It's emitting some kind of quantum field that our instruments can't make sense of." Ilara felt a thrill of discovery mixed with apprehension. They were looking at something truly extraordinary, something that could change the course of human history. But the ship's eerie silence and impossible technology also filled her with a sense of foreboding. She made a decision. "Assemble a boarding party. We're going to take a closer look." As the team prepared, Ilara couldn't help but wonder about the ship's origins. Who had built it? And for what purpose? The questions gnawed at her as she suited up, checking and double-checking her equipment. They docked with the alien vessel, the Frontier's airlock connecting with a shimmering portal on the ship's hull. Ilara took a deep breath, then stepped across the threshold into the unknown. The interior of the ship was just as strange as the exterior. The walls seemed to pulse with an inner light, and the air was filled with a faint, subsonic hum. Ilara and her team moved cautiously through the curving corridors, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. They entered what appeared to be a vast central chamber, dominated by a glowing column of pure energy. Consoles and displays lined the walls, covered in glyphs and symbols that Ilara couldn't even begin to decipher. Suddenly, a hologram flickered to life in the center of the room. It coalesced into the figure of a human woman, her features strangely familiar. When she spoke, her voice was urgent and tinged with desperation. "If you are seeing this, then our mission has succeeded. We have sent this ship back through time to warn you of the coming danger. In our future, in your future, humanity faces an existential threat. An alien race known as the Vakari will invade, their technology far surpassing our own. We fought them, but we were losing. This ship, the Odysseus, was our last hope." Ilara's mind reeled. A message from the future. An alien invasion. It seemed impossible, and yet the evidence was right in front of her. The hologram continued, "This ship contains technology that will be essential in the coming war. Study it, learn from it, and use it to defend Earth. But be warned, the Vakari are already on their way. You have limited time to prepare." With that, the hologram winked out, leaving Ilara and her stunned crew in darkness. They looked at each other, the weight of this revelation sinking in. They had just stumbled upon knowledge that could save humanity, but also the terrifying realization that their species was on the brink of a war they might not survive. In the silence of the alien ship, Ilara made a vow. She would do whatever it took to unlock the secrets of the Odysseus and give humanity a fighting chance against the coming storm. The future was depending on them. Unlocking the secrets. Back aboard the ISS Frontier, Ilara called an emergency meeting of her senior staff. They gathered in the ship's briefing room, the holographic display now showing a detailed scan of the Odysseus. "What have we learned?" Ilara asked, turning to her chief engineer, Leia Sorensen. Leia, a brilliant woman with a perpetually excited gleam in her eye, practically bounced on her heels as she spoke. "Commander, the technology on that ship is unlike anything I've ever seen. The quantum field it generates allows it to manipulate space-time in ways we thought were impossible. It could revolutionize space travel, energy production, even our understanding of the universe itself." Ilara nodded, her mind already racing with the implications. "And the weapons? Light years ahead of anything we have," Kai chimed in. "Based on these schematics, the Odysseus is equipped with some kind of phase disruptor cannon that can bypass any known shield technology." "Which means," Ilara said grimly, "that if the Valkyrie have similar tech, our current defenses will be useless against them." A heavy silence fell over the room. They all knew what was at stake. "Our priority," Ilara said, "is to understand this technology and find a way to integrate it into our own systems. Leia, I want you and your team working around the clock. Kai, analyze the Odysseus databanks for any information on the Valkyrie, their tactics, their weaknesses, anything that can give us an edge." As her crew hurried to their tasks, Ilara retreated to her quarters. She needed to report this discovery to Earth Command, but she also needed a moment to process the enormity of what they had found. She sat at her desk, staring at a holo image of Earth. The blue-green globe looked so fragile hanging in space, so vulnerable. And now, the fate of every person on that planet rested on the knowledge locked within an impossible ship. Ilara's thoughts were interrupted by a chime at her door. "Enter," she called. It was Leia, her face aglow with excitement. "Commander, you need to see this." In the Frontier's engineering bay, Ilara stared in awe at the sight before her. Leia and her team had managed to install one of the Odysseus power cores into the Frontier systems. The room thrummed with an eerie blue light, the air itself seeming to crackle with energy. "We've only tapped a fraction of its potential," Leia explained. "But look." She pointed to a display which showed the Frontier's engine output. The numbers were staggering. "With this kind of power," Leia said, her voice hushed with reverence, "we could reach the edges of the known universe. We could do things that were only theoretical before." Ilara marveled at the achievement, but a nagging thought tugged at her mind. "Leia, in the message, the hologram said we have limited time. How long before we can integrate this tech into our fleet?" Leia's excitement dimmed slightly. "That's the problem. This is so far beyond our current understanding. It could take years, maybe even decades, to fully reverse engineer and replicate." Ilara's heart sank. They didn't have years. If the future hologram was right, the Valkyrie were already on their way. She was about to respond when Kay's voice crackled over the comm. "Commander, you better get up here. I found something in the Odysseus databanks. Something you need to see." On the bridge, Kai brought up a star map. A single system was highlighted, a pulsing red dot in a sea of stars. "According to the Odysseus records," Kai explained, "this is where the Valkyrie originated. And this," he zoomed in on the map, revealing a detailed schematic of a planet, "is their homeworld." Ilara leaned in, studying the readout. The Valkyrie homeworld was a harsh, unforgiving place, with a toxic atmosphere and crushing gravity. But what caught her eye was the notation next to the planet's image. "Valkyrie Central Command," she read aloud, "the heart of their military operations." An idea began to form in Ilara's mind. A desperate, dangerous idea, but one that could buy them the time they needed. She turned to her crew, a fierce determination burning in her eyes. "I have a plan. It's risky, maybe even suicidal, but it might be our only chance." As she laid out her proposal, she saw the mix of fear and resolve on her crew's faces. They knew the stakes, and they were ready to do whatever it took. The Frontier, equipped with its new quantum drive, would launch a preemptive strike on the Valkyrie homeworld. They would use the Odysseus' advanced weaponry to cripple the Valkyrie's military infrastructure, hopefully delaying their invasion of Earth. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble. But as Ilara looked around at her crew, at the determined faces of the men and women ready to risk everything for the sake of their species, she knew it was a gamble they had to take. The future of humanity depended on it. Preemptive strike. The ISS Frontier hurtled through hyperspace, its quantum engines propelling it at speeds that would have been unimaginable just weeks ago. On the bridge, Commander Ilara Voss stood resolute, her eyes fixed on the viewscreen that showed the shifting colors of the wormhole's interior. They were on a mission that could decide the fate of humanity, a preemptive strike against the Valkyrie homeworld. Using the advanced technology from the Odysseus, they hoped to cripple the aliens' military capabilities, buying Earth precious time to prepare its defenses. But as they drew closer to their target, doubt began to gnaw at Ilara's mind. Were they doing the right thing? Was it moral to strike first, to potentially kill millions of Valkyrie civilians in an attempt to save human lives? She was jolted out of her thoughts by Kai's voice. "Commander, we're approaching the Valkyrie system." Ilara nodded, pushing her doubts aside. She had made her decision, and now she had to see it through. "Take us out of hyperspace. Laya, prepare the phase disruptor cannon." The Frontier dropped into normal space on the outskirts of the Valkyrie system. The alien star was a baleful red eye, glaring at them across the void. Ilara felt a chill run down her spine as the planet came into view on the screen, a roiling mass of toxic clouds and volcanic fury. Scanning for targets, Kai reported, his fingers flying over his console. "I'm detecting multiple large structures on the surface, likely military installations." Ilara took a deep breath. "Lock on to the largest one. Prepare to fire on my mark." But before she could give the order, alarms blared across the bridge. "Commander," Kai shouted, his voice taut with fear. "Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. They're Valkyrie, and they're heading straight for us." On the view screen, a dozen alien ships swooped towards them, their hulls glinting with a sickly green light. They were huge, dwarfing the Frontier and bristling with weapons. Ilara's heart raced. How had they known? Had they been expecting an attack? There was no time to ponder. Raise shields, evasive maneuvers. The Frontier veered and twisted as the Valkyrie ships opened fire. The impact rocked the ship, alarms shrieking, consoles sparking. In the chaos, Ilara saw her chance. "Leah, the cannon." Leah nodded, her face grim. "Charged and ready, Commander." "Fire." A lance of pure energy erupted from the Frontier's bow, searing through space towards the Valkyrie homeworld. It struck the largest military structure dead on, the explosion visible even from orbit. For a moment, Ilara dared to hope. But then, to her horror, the structure remained standing. Its shields flickered and held, absorbing the blast. The Valkyrie ships pressed their attack, their weapons tearing through the Frontier's own shields. The bridge shook, sparks cascading from ruptured conduits. "Shields down to 20%, Kai reported, his voice barely audible over the din. "Hull breach on deck 7. Ilara gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles white. They were outgunned and outmatched. The Valkyrie's technology was even more advanced than they had feared. She made a decision, the only one she could. Retreat. Get us out of here. Leah worked frantically at her console, trying to coax more speed from the straining engines. The Frontier wheeled around, fleeing towards the safety of hyperspace. But the Valkyrie ships were relentless. They pursued, pouring fire into the Frontier's weakening rear shields. Just as the wormhole began to open, a final volley from the alien ships struck home. The Frontier lurched, its engines guttering. "We've lost main power," Leia cried, her face lit by the red glow of emergency lights. "The quantum drive is offline." Ilara felt a cold numbness settle over her. They had failed. And now, they were stranded deep in enemy territory, their ship crippled, their mission in ruins. As the Valkyrie ships closed in, their weapons charging for a final devastating salvo. Ilara closed her eyes. She thought of Earth, of the billions of lives she had sworn to protect. She had failed them. But then, a voice cut through the despair, a voice that was achingly familiar. "This is not the end, Ilara Voss." Ilara's eyes snapped open. On the view screen, the face of the future hologram looked back at her, superimposed over the approaching Vakari ships. "You have not failed," the hologram said, her voice calm and assured. "This was always part of the plan. The Odysseus, the technology, the attack on the Vakari. It was all to bring you here, to this moment." Ilara's mind reeled. "I don't understand." The hologram smiled enigmatically. "You will. Everything depends on what you do next. Trust your instincts, Commander. Trust in the strength of your crew. And remember, the future of humanity is in your hands." With that, the hologram faded, leaving Ilara staring at the looming Vakari ships. "Trust your instincts." The words echoed in Ilara's mind as a new resolve settled over her. She didn't understand the hologram's cryptic message, but she knew one thing: she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. She turned to her crew, seeing her own determination mirrored in their faces. They were battered, but not broken. They would fight to their last breath. "Leah," Ilara said, her voice steady, "can we divert power from life support to the shields?" Leah nodded, already working. "It'll buy us a few minutes at most." "Kai, what about the phase disruptor? Any chance of getting another shot?" Kai checked his readings, then shook his head. The barrel overloaded. It's slag. Ilara digested this, her mind racing. Then an idea struck her, so audacious it almost made her laugh. What about the quantum drive? Could we overload it, create some kind of feedback pulse? Leah's eyes widened. Theoretically, yes, but the energy released would be massive. It could destroy the entire ship. Ilara met her gaze steadily. Could it take out the Vakari fleet too? A slow smile spread across Leah's face as she understood. It just might. Ilara turned to the view screen, to the alien ships bearing down on them. She took a deep breath, feeling a strange calm settle over her. "All right then," she said softly. "Let's give them a send-off they'll never forget. Overload the drive." As Leah worked, Ilara addressed her crew, her voice ringing with conviction. "I won't lie to you. We might not survive this. But if we're going to go down, we're going to take as many of those bastards with us as we can. We're going to show them what humans are made of. We're going to make our last moments a testament to the courage, the ingenuity. We're going to make our last moments a testament to the courage, the ingenuity, and the indomitable spirit of our species. Stand with me now, as we face the unknown together." Ilara's words hung in the air, a rallying cry in the face of annihilation. Around the bridge, her crew stood straighter, their faces set with grim determination. They were ready. The Vakari ships loomed ever closer, filling the view screen. Ilara could imagine the alien commanders on those ships, confident in their superiority, certain of their victory. They had no idea what was coming. Quantum drive overload in 3, 2, 1. Leah's voice was taut with tension. Initiating feedback pulse. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the frontier shuddered violently, as if gripped by an invisible fist. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. The lights flickered and died. The very fabric of the ship seemed to groan under an immense strain. And then, a blinding flash of light erupted from the frontier's core, a pulsing, searing wave of quantum energy that expanded outward in all directions. It struck the Vakari ships like the hand of an angry god. Their shields flared and collapsed, their hulls crumpling like foil under the onslaught. One by one, they disintegrated, consumed by the ravenous energy. On the frontier's bridge, Ilara and her crew watched in awe as their enemies were obliterated. The ship shook around them, alarms blaring, systems failing, but they barely noticed. They had done it. Against all odds, they had struck a blow against the Vakari that would be felt across the galaxy. But their triumph was short-lived. The feedback pulse, having consumed the Valkyrie ships, now turned its fury on the frontier itself. The ship convulsed, its structure beginning to come apart at the seams. In the chaos, Ilara found a strange peace. They had accomplished their mission, had given Earth a fighting chance. Whatever happened now, they had made a difference. She reached out, gripping the hands of Kai and Leah, feeling the warmth of their skin, the pulse of their hearts. Around the bridge, her crew did the same, forging the human chain in the face of oblivion. Together, they faced the searing light as it engulfed the ship, as the frontier, and all within it was consumed. But even as they faded, as their atoms were scattered across the stars, a final thought echoed in Ilara's mind, a whisper of the future hologram's voice. Remember, the future of humanity is in your hands. Echoes of the future. Darkness. Silence. A void that extended into infinity. Was this death? Ilara couldn't be sure. Her last memories were of blinding light, of searing heat, of the frontier coming apart around her. But then, in the darkness, a glimmer. A faint pulse of light, growing steadily brighter. Ilara felt herself drawn towards it, as if pulled by an invisible cord. As she approached, the light resolved into a familiar shape. The Odysseus, the mysterious ship from the future, hung before her, its hull glowing with an inner radiance. Ilara reached out, her hand passing through the ship's exterior, as if it were made of mist. She felt a tingling warmth, a sense of invitation. She stepped forward, passing into the heart of the Odysseus. And then the darkness fell away, replaced by a vista that took her breath away. She stood in a vast chamber, its walls composed of shimmering energy fields. And all around her, stretching out into what seemed like infinity, were other chambers, other Odysseys, each one unique, each one pulsing with its own inner light. "Welcome, Ilara Voss." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a resonant echo that filled the chamber. Ilara turned and found herself face to face with the future hologram. Only now, the hologram seemed more substantial, more real. "What is this place?" Ilara asked, her voice filled with wonder. "Am I dead?" The hologram smiled enigmatically. "Not dead, no. You are in the nexus, the crossroads of all possible futures." She gestured to the countless chambers around them. Each of these represents a potential timeline, a path that humanity might take. Some lead to triumph, others to disaster. And a very few, like the one you came from, hang in the balance, their fate not yet decided. Ilara struggled to understand. But we failed. The Valkyrie homeworld, their defenses were too strong. We couldn't stop them. Couldn't you? The hologram's eyes sparkled with a hint of mischief. "Think, Ilara. What happened after you overloaded your quantum drive?" Ilara frowned, the memories hazy. "I remember the Valkyrie ships being destroyed. And then, our own ship." Her eyes widened with sudden realization. The feedback pulse. It wasn't just a weapon, was it? It was a signal. The hologram nodded approvingly. A signal that echoed across time and space, a beacon drawing the attention of every human ship, every human colony. They all saw the sacrifice you made, the courage you showed in the face of impossible odds. She waved her hand, and one of the energy fields shimmered, resolving into an image. Ilara leaned forward, her heart pounding. She saw Earth, but not the Earth she remembered. This Earth was a hive of activity, its orbit filled with countless ships, its surface bristling with defenses, and in the skies above, a familiar sight, the ISS Frontier, rebuilt and expanded, now leading a vast armada. Your actions, Ilara, inspired a generation. Humanity united as never before, pooling their resources, their knowledge, their determination. They reverse-engineered the technology from the Odysseus, built new ships, new weapons, and when the Valkyrie finally came, they were ready. The image shifted, showing a titanic space battle. Human ships and Valkyrie ships clashed against the backdrop of the stars, energy weapons crisscrossing the void. And at the heart of it all, the new frontier leading the charge. Ilara watched, tears in her eyes, as humanity fought back, as they pushed the Vakari back, system by system, planet by planet, until finally, in a last desperate stand, the Vakari were defeated, their remaining ships fleeing into the depths of space. The hologram turned to Ilara, her expression one of deep pride. You see, your sacrifice was not in vain. It was the spark that ignited humanity's greatest triumph. Ilara felt a surge of emotion, a mix of relief, joy, and humility. They had done it. Against all odds, they had changed the course of history. But a question still nagged at her. The Nexus, she said, gesturing to the countless chambers around them. What is its purpose? Why show me this? The hologram's expression turned serious. The Nexus is a waypoint, a place where those who have shaped the future can glimpse the consequences of their actions. But it is also a warning. She waved her hand again, and the images changed. Now Ilara saw other futures, darker ones. Futures where humanity had fallen to the Vakari, or to other, even more terrible threats. Futures where Earth lay in ruins, its cities shattered, its people enslaved or extinct. The future is always in motion, the hologram said softly. Every choice, every action, sends ripples through time. Some lead to salvation, others to damnation. She fixed Ilara with a piercing gaze. You have been given a great gift, Ilara Voss, a chance to see the future you helped to create. But with that gift comes a responsibility. Ilara nodded slowly, understanding dawning. To guard that future, to make sure it becomes reality. Yes, the hologram said, but more than that. To be a guide, a mentor, to those who will come after. To help them understand the choices they face, the consequences of their actions. She smiled then, a warm, human smile. That is your destiny, Ilara. That is the role you have earned. Ilara felt a sense of purpose settle over her, a clarity she had never known before. She understood now why she had been chosen, why the Odysseus had come to her ship, her crew. It was not just to change the past, but to shape the future. She straightened, a new resolve in her eyes. I'm ready, she said simply. The hologram nodded, a look of satisfaction on her face. Then go, Ilara Voss. Go and fulfill your destiny. The chamber began to fade, the energy fields dimming. Ilara felt herself being drawn back towards the familiar contours of reality. But as she faded, she heard the hologram's voice one last time, a whisper that seemed to come from the very stars themselves. Remember, the future is always watching. Guardians of the future. Ilara's eyes snapped open, the sterile white of a medical bay coming into focus around her. She blinked, disoriented, her mind still reeling from her experience in the Nexus. Was it real? Had she truly seen the future, spoken with the holographic guide? Commander Voss, can you hear me? The voice was familiar, grounding. Dr. Sten, the Frontier's chief medical officer, leaned over her, his face lined with concern. Ilara tried to sit up, wincing as a wave of dizziness washed over her. What happened? Dr. Sten gently pushed her back down. Easy, Commander. You've been through quite an ordeal. He glanced at the medical readouts above her bed, shaking his head in amazement. Frankly, it's a miracle you're alive. When we found you, after the Frontier, well, we thought we'd lost you. Memory rushed back, sharp and painful. The desperation of their last stand against the Vakari, the wrenching decision to overload the quantum drive. The searing light, the sense of disintegration. My crew, Ilara managed, her throat tight. Kai, Leia, the others. Dr. Sten's expression told her everything she needed to know. The pain hit her like a physical blow, a wave of grief so intense it left her breathless. They were gone. The brave men and women who had stood with her, who had given everything for a chance at victory. She had led them to their deaths. But even as despair threatened to engulf her, A flicker of memory surfaced. The nexus, the futures she had seen, the role she had been given. A guardian, a guide, a beacon of hope in the darkness to come. Ilara closed her eyes, drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. Her crew had sacrificed everything to give humanity a chance. She would not let that sacrifice be in vain. She opened her eyes, fixing Dr. Sten with a gaze that made him straighten instinctively. "Doctor, I need a full report. How long was I out? What's the situation with the Vakari? And Earth, is it?" Dr. Sten held up a hand, forestalling her questions. "Commander, you should rest. You've been through a severe physical and emotional trauma. You need time to." "What I need," Ilara cut in, her voice sharp, "is answers. The Vakari are still out there, and Earth is in danger. Every moment counts." She softened slightly, seeing the concern in Sten's eyes. "Please, Doctor, I need to know." Dr. Sten sighed, but nodded. "Very well. You've been in a regenerative coma for nearly 2 weeks. After the frontier was destroyed, escape pods were launched. Yours was picked up by a passing freighter." He hesitated, then continued. "As for the Vakari, there have been no further incursions. In fact, long-range scanners suggest they're retreating, pulling back to their own space." Ilara's heart leaped. It was just as the hologram had shown her. The sacrifice of the frontier had bought them time, had given humanity a chance to prepare. But she knew it was only a temporary respite. The Vakari would be back, and in greater numbers. The real fight was still to come. "I need to get to Earth," she said, swinging her legs off the bed. "I need to speak with command, to coordinate our defenses, too." She swayed as her feet touched the floor, black spots swimming in her vision. Dr. Sten caught her, easing her back onto the bed. "Commander, you're in no condition to go anywhere. Your body has been through a tremendous strain. You need rest, recuperation." Ilara wanted to argue, but the weakness in her limbs, the fog in her mind, told her Sten was right. She couldn't help Earth if she collapsed on the way to the shuttle bay. "All right," she said reluctantly. "But I can't stay here. Every day I'm away from Earth is a day we lose in preparation." Dr. Sten nodded. "I understand. I'll prepare a recovery plan. We'll have you back on your feet as quickly as possible." He turned to go, but Ilara stopped him. "Doctor, my crew, have the families been notified?" A shadow passed over Sten's face. "Yes, there will be a memorial service, once you're well enough to attend." Ilara nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "Thank you," she managed. As Dr. Sten left, Ilara lay back, staring at the ceiling. The weight of her crew's loss, of the responsibility she now carried, settled over her like a shroud. But beneath the grief, beneath the burden, a small, fierce flame flickered in her heart. Hope. She had seen what humanity could achieve, what they could overcome if they stood together. The future was not set, not while there were those willing to fight for it. And fight she would. For her crew. For Earth. For the future they had given everything to protect. She closed her eyes, a single, silent vow echoing in her mind. "I will not fail." Legacy. The memorial service was a somber affair, the weight of loss hanging heavy in the air. Ilara stood at the podium, looking out over the sea of faces, the families and friends of her fallen crew. She had prepared a speech, had tried to find the words to express the magnitude of what their loved ones had accomplished, the sacrifice they had made. But standing here, seeing the grief etched into every face, the words seemed hollow, inadequate. How could she convey the true scope of what had happened? The impossible ship from the future, the dire warning it carried, the battle against the Vakari, the desperate, world-shattering choice to overload the quantum drive. And the Nexus, the glimpse of the futures that could be, the role she had been given in shaping them. No, there were no words for that. No way to make them understand the weight she now carried, the responsibility to ensure their sacrifice had not been in vain. So instead, she spoke from the heart. They were heroes, she said simply, her voice cracking with emotion. Each and every one of them. They faced an impossible enemy, an unimaginable threat, and they did not hesitate. She paused, letting the words sink in. I cannot take away your pain. I cannot fill the void they have left behind. But I can make you this promise. She straightened, her eyes blazing with conviction. Their sacrifice will not be forgotten. What they did, the future they bought for us with their blood and courage, will be honored, will be protected. Her gaze swept the room, as if willing them to understand. We are the guardians of that future now, every one of us, and we will not fail. As she stepped down from the podium, the room was silent. And then, one by one, they rose. A slow, building applause that echoed off the walls, a sound that was part grief, part gratitude, and part something else. Hope. In the days and weeks that followed, Ilara threw herself into the work of preparing Earth's defenses. She met with generals and scientists, politicians and engineers, sharing what she had learned from the Odysseus, from her glimpse of the futures in the Nexus. Under her guidance, a new fleet took shape. Ships equipped with quantum drives and phase disruptor cannons, crewed by men and women who had been inspired by the story of the frontier's last stand. And at the heart of it all, a new ship, the ISS Vanguard, a vessel that embodied everything the Odysseus represented. Advanced, adaptable, a symbol of humanity's resilience and ingenuity. Ilara stood on the Vanguard's bridge, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Vicari were regrouping, preparing for their next assault. But this time, humanity would be ready. She thought back to that moment in the Nexus, when the hologram had shown her the potential futures, the paths of triumph and disaster, the delicate balance in between. She understood now the true weight of the choices they would make, the actions they would take. But she also understood something else, that the future, for all its uncertainty, was not fixed. It was shaped by the decisions of individuals, by the courage and compassion and hope of the human spirit. And as long as there were those willing to stand up, to fight for what they believed in, that future would always be worth protecting. The comm crackled to life, breaking her reverie. Commander Voss, all systems are green. The fleet is ready. Ilara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment, the enormity of what lay ahead. But she also felt something else, a sense of purpose, of clarity, the knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Take us out, she said, her voice steady. Let's go make history. As the Vanguard leaped forward, the stars blurring into streaks of light, Ilara felt a smile tug at her lips. The future was waiting, and humanity would meet it head-on, united and unafraid. For in the end, that was the true legacy of the frontier, of the brave men and women who had given their lives. Not just the technology they had secured, or the time they had bought, but the spirit they had ignited, the courage, the determination, the unbreakable will of the human soul. And that, Ilara knew, was a force that could never be conquered. As the Vanguard sailed into the unknown, carrying the hopes and dreams of a species, a single thought echoed in her mind, the final message from the hologram, a promise and a challenge. The future of humanity is in your hands. And in that moment, Ilara knew that future had never looked brighter. The end.